Bitcoin is close to becoming worthless.
Let's go. Now, what's the Bitcoin?
Bitcoin's like rat poison.
Yeah. Oh,
The greatest scam in history.
let's get it.
Bitcoin will go to fucking zero.
Yeah.
Alright, you ungovernable misfits. I'm your host, Max. Everybody knows that Bitcoin is useless, worthless, and doomed to fail. But what if everyone's wrong? What if it's the system that is doomed to fail? Join me as I speak to some of the brightest people in the space and slither to the deepest, darkest depths of the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Today on Bit by Bit, I speak to Bitcoin Q+A for the final part of our 4-part series. We've talked about wallets, we've talked about nodes, we've discussed Lightning, and now we're going to learn about Coinjoin. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have chain surveillance companies tracking our every move, but the reality is we do. Just because they want to spy on you doesn't mean you should allow them. Luckily, we have some amazing tools at our disposal, and Bitcoin Q+A does an amazing job of talking us through exactly how to use them. I hope you enjoy learning about Coinjoin, and if at the end of the show you want to give it a try but you're not 100% confident, then check out the links in the show notes and have a read through Bitcoin Q+A's content. It really is brilliant. Bitcoin Q+A cares deeply about privacy. It's clear from his website, all of his writing, and our previous episodes. He's been really kind and helped me with some of the privacy goals that I was striving for but just didn't have the technical capability to reach. This type of kindness is just one of the reasons that I love doing what I do so much. I've met some amazing people and I've made some great friends. Bitcoin Q+A I would now class as one of them. So thank you to him for the last few episodes, helping me and for putting out all of this amazing content. And thank you to my show sponsor, CoinFloor, for making this all possible. Bitcoin Q+A, welcome back to Bit by Bit. It's nice to have you on again.
We are back for number 4, Max. It's a pleasure to be here, as always.
And so today, Coinjoin. We've obviously covered the wallets, we've covered the nodes, and now we're here for Coinjoin. What is Coinjoin? Why should we be doing it, and why is it so important?
Okay, I think it's probably easier to start with the why first, and then let's explain the problem first that Coinjoin is trying to fix. So we've covered the basics of the blockchain. So everybody listening to this, well, if they've covered off those first episodes that we've done, will be aware that the blockchain is completely transparent. So anybody can log into a block explorer and can see any transaction they like. Basically, they can look at blocks from 10 minutes ago, or they can look at blocks from 10 years ago, and they can follow those transactions. They can see where coins are going from A to B to C and so on. And there are chain surveillance firms that are doing exactly that, to try and cluster users together and to follow them across the blockchain. They sort of badge it to say that they are trying to stop bad actors from doing naughty things using Bitcoin. The problem with that is obviously that type of dragnet surveillance, it sort of tars everybody with the same brush, and so you or I or anybody listening to this could fall prey to these firms that are tracking people, and that could result in if this surveillance firm was working with an exchange and they deemed that one of your previous transactions before you sent to this exchange was something that they didn't agree with, they could either block your deposit to the exchange. If you've already got funds on that exchange, they could sort of ask you for additional identification. They could even prevent you from withdrawing your funds again because they don't agree with one of your previous transactions. Now, obviously, that's not a Bitcoin that I want, and I'm guessing it's not a Bitcoin that you want either, Max.
No.
And it kind of goes against everything that sort of, well, most people getting into Bitcoin, it's against most people's principles and of sort of censorship resistant payments. And for me, these chain surveillance firms they're going completely against that. And so enter Coinjoin, which is a tool that's been created to try and fool, well, anybody, including these chain surveillance firms, to fool them and to stop them being able to track entities across the blockchain. And the reason I say entities is because obviously Bitcoin is pseudonymous, so there are no names on the blockchain. It's just addresses, sending from address A to address B, and so on and so forth. Now, obviously, if you're buying KYC Bitcoin from, say, your typical exchange like a Cash App or anything like that, obviously then these companies do have the option, if they're working together with chain surveillance firms, to tie addresses on the blockchain to your personal identity. So again, that's probably, you hear me banging on about it all the time, Max, about going no KYC, and perhaps we can get into that later rather than diverting away from the whole Coinjoin piece. So Coinjoin is a tool designed to basically mess with the heuristics that these chain surveillance firms use to track people. So a heuristic, basically, for those that have not heard the term before, is kind of an assumption, basically. One of the common ones that most of these surveillance firms use is known as the common input ownership heuristic. So that basically just means that if there are more than one input into a Bitcoin transaction, it is assumed that both of those inputs belong to the same entity, just because of the nature of how transactions are created. Generally, an entity would need control of both of those inputs to input them into the transaction. So it is always assumed that they belong to the same person, which again, if that can leak various privacy data. If you receive a transaction from me, and you also receive a transaction from somebody that's deemed a shady company or a shady character, and then you combine those two inputs into a transaction to, say, an exchange, and you've sort of by linking those two inputs together, you've given away the fact that they both belong to you. And again, like I said before, that exchange might deem one of those inputs has come from a shady source and say, no, I'm sorry, we're not doing business with you anymore. So Coinjoin, where does that all tie into Coinjoin? So a Coinjoin comes in many shapes and sizes, but they all kind of work towards the same basic principle, and that is two or more users collaborating to put together their pieces of Bitcoin, their UTXOs, into a single transaction. And that transaction is structured so that anybody looking at that transaction on a block explorer would not be able to tie the inputs to the outputs. So it's basically, if you were to sort of think of an image of this, it would kind of look like a load of lines all jumbled up together. I'll tell you what I'll do, actually, Max. I'll give you a link to an image of one, so you can include it in the show notes or something. Great. Just so people can visualize it. But basically, it's
on your website with all the green lines.
That's
going
the one.
through it.
Yeah, that's from kycp.org. Yeah. So it's basically a load of users jumbling up their pieces of Bitcoin together, so that anybody watching the chain cannot tie the output to the input of the transaction. So what that does then is it's kind of like if it's done correctly, it's kind of like a brick wall. So they may have been able to follow the 10 transactions previous to this that you made. Once they hit your Coinjoin transaction, they can't say for sure which of those outputs of that transaction that you took part in is yours. So they would either have to, again, guess, and they might get it wrong depending on how the CoinJoin is constructed. They might have 5 different paths to follow after that. So obviously, this is again, it's like a brick wall, so to speak, and they can't be sure which path after that. Any future transactions that you make are you. So it makes it very costly for them then. So if they were hell-bent on following you again, they would have to follow all 5 of these, or however many outputs there were to the CoinJoin. They would have to follow all of those paths to try and wait for you to slip up. And obviously, if that path goes on and you maintain good spending habits after the CoinJoin, they can never ever be certain which of these outputs is yours.
Okay. Yeah, so basically what you're saying is it's kind of like they obviously know, because you bought with KYC, they know your name and address and all your details. They then know where you've sent that Bitcoin from that point to another wallet or another wallet after that. And they're then assuming that you're still the owner of that amount of Bitcoin, and they can continuously track you and see how much you have, who you're interacting with, and everything that you're doing. They don't know 100% but they can have a pretty good guess. And what you're saying is that this basically breaks that link and makes it much, much harder, or, in an ideal world, impossible for them to track, because I guess it's not just like, oh, well, it's so that they can, it's like anyone can do this, anyone can track, and anyone can see how much you have, and potentially, if you're somebody who's bought a large amount, you could potentially be a target. So actually, a lot of this is for safety reasons as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think a good term with CoinJoin is it kind of increases the user's deniability. So, like you say, it just creates, for anybody watching, it creates lots of possible outcomes. So that these chain surveillance firms are never ever sure which path to follow afterwards. So, like I say, it's kind of like it offers you forward-looking privacy, basically. So, key thing to remember afterwards is that obviously, as great as some of these CoinJoin implementations are, that's only a single transaction, and it should. I think we'll cover this off later with some of the Samourai stuff, but all of the transactions that you make afterwards, after the CoinJoin, you need to be mindful of the steps that you're taking, because this CoinJoin could sort of create that proverbial brick wall in the transaction history and give you a fresh start, but you can very easily slip up afterwards. So it's very prudent that you maintain some good spending habits after the CoinJoin as well, which, again, like I say, we'll cover that off in more detail after.
Okay, so and this is sort of like coin control and making sure that you're not having these things merge. So you may have had something that has broken that link, and then you merge it back into a wallet that already has the links, and then they can assume that, oh, okay, you're back in control of these. Is that the sort of thing that you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So I'll give you a working example. So let's say, make it nice round numbers to easy to follow. Let's say you put one Bitcoin through a CoinJoin implementation and break that down into 10 smaller pieces over various CoinJoin transactions. So you've now got 10 pieces of 0.1 Bitcoin. If after that so let's say you wanted to send them all to cold storage. So if you were to create a transaction from a wallet that doesn't allow you coin control, which means basically you can select which pieces of Bitcoin you want to include into that transaction. So let's say some wallets offer a select all button or a send all button. So you've broken down that one Bitcoin through CoinJoin transactions into 10 smaller pieces. Great, you've now got some privacy, some forward-looking privacy. And then you hit the send all button and create a transaction that sends it to your cold card back into one big chunk of Bitcoin. Anybody watching the chain, it wouldn't take them too long to associate your original transaction, the CoinJoin that broke it down from one Bitcoin into 10 smaller pieces, it wouldn't take them too much to work out, well, hang on, 10 transactions ago, this person had 1 Bitcoin, this entity had 1 Bitcoin, they broke it down, and oh, look, they've merged it the exact same amount back together again. They could use that again as one of their heuristics to assume that that is the same person. So effectively, you've just wasted your money on fees for a Coinjoin, and you've also just given up all that privacy again, and they're sort of back to square one, and they know where your funds are being held. So I think, like I say, coin control is important, and using any post-mix spending tools that are available, which again we'll probably cover off a bit more after with the Samourai stuff.
Definitely. So I guess for most people, and I'm speaking, because of experience with this, when it took me a little bit of time to actually pull the trigger and get involved and actually start to coin join my funds, because it seems there's lots of ways that it's really easy to trip yourself up and make mistakes, and it sort of worried me to the point where I was like, oh, do you know what? Like, this is just too complicated, and I'm gonna make a mistake, and then I'm gonna end up wasting a load of money doing it, and I'm not gonna get what it was I wanted out of it anyway. But after speaking to you in the background over the last, whatever, couple of months, I've gone from having, nothing ever going through a Coinjoin to now actually using Samourai, and it's been great. It's been really good, and I'm sure I found a way to fuck it up somehow, and I'll need your help to fix it down the line. But it seems at this point that I haven't, and I think that it's a lot of it is just people being concerned about not knowing how to do it, and am I doing it properly? So what I thought would be good for this episode is, let's talk about what I think we'd both agree is the most simple, easy, best user interface for a Coinjoin. And I think that's Samourai right now. And let's try and take someone through from what a normal person will do is they'll maybe buy from a couple of different exchanges. Maybe they have a little bit from a non-KYC place, but they've bought from maybe a couple of different exchanges where they've got all their details, and then they've maybe whacked all of that onto a Trezor or a Ledger or a cold card, and that's where it is now. It's all sat there. For that person who's now thinking, yes, you know what, I actually don't really want to be tracked. I don't want everyone knowing how much I've got and what I'm doing with it. I want to actually have some privacy in my life. Let's talk it through from there, if that's possible.
Yeah, sure. So before I get into the detail of that, just using the example that you said about they bought off some KYC exchanges, which with my my sort of reality check head on is probably what unfortunately most people are going to do. So I just want to warn everybody that if you did buy from a KYC exchange, throw in all of your sats through a Coinjoin implementation like Whirlpool is never going to un-KYC you. It's not going to erase that record of you buying X amount of sats from Cash App on this date using this payment method with this driver's license, blah, 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 etc., etc. You can never get rid of that. So what Coinjoin will do for people that have bought via a KYC source is, like I touched on earlier, it gives forward-looking privacy. So again, the exchange, government, whoever has got that record, they know because they've gone through that identification process of how much Bitcoin they own. But anybody following on chain wouldn't know after it's been to Coinjoin, through a Coinjoin, where those sats are being held. They wouldn't know what addresses they were held at. So it is an improvement. But for me, the ultimate would be to buy from a non-KYC source, such as Bisq or Hodl Hodl, or even locally, if you know people locally, buying with cash, because you're starting from such a better place there, where the sats that you own then are immediately not tied to your identity. So if you were to throw them through a Coinjoin, then the only person that would know you had those sats was the person that sold them to you. And then if you put them through a Coinjoin, obviously they can't follow you either. So you're just in such a better place. So yeah, I would urge to go non-KYC first, because you're just starting 10 steps ahead. However, I live in the real world, and I know that most people aren't gonna immediately go, I like Bitcoin, let's log into Bisc and buy myself my KYC sats. Unfortunately, the UX and stuff isn't there when compared to some of the most common exchanges. So they've got it on their hardware wallet, and then they want to Coinjoin. Is that where we're up to, Max?
Yeah, so from what you've just said, I think that you raised some really good points there, and I completely agree that it's almost like best practice now. If you're in that situation, realistically, would be to probably sell those sats back on an exchange and then buy non KYC and then go through the Coinjoin and all the rest of it. But a lot of people will say, well, then I've got the fees of doing that, and maybe the Bitcoin's gone up, and maybe they're worried about the tax, and then they're worried about, well, okay, what if I sell then, and then we have a sudden run in price, and then I don't manage to buy them through a non KYC exchange, and there's lots of things where people would worry. And so I would say that, probably for 80-90% of people listening to this now, they'll say, look, okay, it's not perfect. Maybe going forward, I'm going to go non KYC, but they already know that I've bought. I don't want to be messing around with the tax. I don't want to be making mistakes. So I'll just keep what I've got, and going forward, I'll go no KYC. But what I've got, I actually want to break these links, and it's not perfect, but let me break these links, and so that people can't track me and know what I've got going forward. So for those people, what's their next step?
Yeah, I think just one final point to echo there is that is probably the best option for people to take. Those that have already bought KYC that don't want to deal with the tax, just put that. Coinjoin it, yeah, by all means. It's going to give you some forward-looking privacy. Get it into a storage solution that's worked for you, i.e., a cold card or something like that, and then just sort of keep those completely segregated for cold storage, and just start dipping your toes into no KYC, and just start using that approach moving forward. As long as you keep those two pots of Bitcoin, your KYC and your no KYC completely separate. You're you're still in a better place than you were before. So that'll probably be a happy medium. You don't have to deal with any tax or anything like that. So for those people, what's the next step? So obviously, first step is to download Samourai Wallet, which is unfortunately Android only. So sorry, iPhone users. You're going to have to shell out for a cheap Android phone. Lucky for you, they are pretty cheap these days. You can pick one up for less than £100, really.
Yeah. So, and again with this, so you can get a used one for less than £100 on eBay, or a used one, or you can get one for not a lot of money. But kind of again, best practice on this. Are we saying Pixel 3 and flash graphene on it, and follow one of the videos? Matt Odell's done one, and a few other people have done them. That would be what, £250 and sort of a day's messing around.
Yeah, I think obviously that would be the ultimate, but again, coming from the real world, are most people going to do that? No. Do they just want to Coinjoin some sats just to gain some forward-looking privacy? If that's the case, then a £60 Android phone that they leave in their top drawer just for Samourai Wallet is going to be more than enough. Obviously, graphene, a graphene phone with de-Googleified is going to be the ultimate setup, but it's not that easy to do for the normie. Yeah. So yeah, your £60 Android phone is going to do the job perfectly. Like I say, So get yourself a Samourai Wallet, and so the first step would be to send in a small amount of Bitcoin. The reason I say a small amount is it's always good with any new tech that you're not used to, just to try it out with a low amount of risk first off. So Whirlpool, the Coinjoin implementation by the Samourai team, has 3 mixing pools, 3 sizes of Coinjoin basically. That is 0.01 or 1 million sat pool. They have a 0.05 pool, which is 5 million sats, and then they have the big boy Whirlpool, which is 0.5 Bitcoin, which is 50 million sats. So what I would suggest is transfer just a little bit more than a million sats into your Samourai Wallet, which works just the same as any other transaction would. You just scan the QR code or copy and paste the address in like you would any other transaction. Just wait for that to confirm onto the blockchain, which is you only need one confirmation into your Samourai Wallet before you can start mixing. So you would then, once those funds have mixed, you can hit the blue button in the bottom right hand corner, which would open up the Whirlpool service, and then you can just select basically which UTXOs, which pieces of Bitcoin you want to mix. And now you can combine multiple ones, or you can just mix, using the example that we're talking about now, you're probably just going to have one UTXO of 0.015 or something like that. So you pick which of those UTXOs you want to mix, and then pick the pool that you want to enter, which in our case is going to be the 1 million sat pool. You'll then get a bit of a summary of the fees. So the fees, just probably worth touching on with Samourai, and the fees are completely fixed. So it doesn't matter if you send 10 Bitcoin in to the 0.01 pool, or if you send 0.01 into the 0.01 pool, you would pay the exact same fee. The coordinator fee, it's known as, which is basically the small fee that the Whirlpool coordinator takes for putting these transactions together. There are obviously a Coinjoin is an on-chain transaction, so there are some very small minor fees involved. But again, they're, for most people, they're going to be negligible, to be honest with you. So you are with Whirlpool incentivized to Coinjoin more at once, because you pay less of a fee as a percentage. Like I say, they're always fixed, no matter they're fixed per pool size, no matter how much Bitcoin you send into them. But even with that incentive, I would still always urge people just to try a little bit, just to start off, just to dip your toes in and get comfortable. And then, once you're happy with the process, that's when you can start throwing some more sats in and saving on those fees. But even with that said, the fees aren't astronomical.
Yeah, what are people looking at fee-wise?
So fee-wise, let me just pull it up.
I know you sent me this Telegram bot that works it out, which was pretty cool. But just like on average, between what sort of...
Oh, you've put me on the spot now, Max.
Sorry.
Here we go. Right, so the pool fee for the smallest pool, so the 0.01 pool, is 50,000 sats. The pool fee for the 5 million sat pool is 250,000 sats. And then the pool fee for the big boy pool, the 0.5 Bitcoin, is 0.02, which is 2 million sats. So as a percentage, if you're putting in just above the pool fee, the pool size, so 0.01, your percentage is going to be higher, or much higher, than if you were mixing 10 times as much in the same pool, because that fee is completely fixed.
Yeah, and if people are doing large amounts, it gets below a 1%, doesn't it? It's like a tenth of a percent, or So anyone who's listening now, like, again, the way you explained it is absolutely right. But when I was listening before to people talking about this and talking about, it's 100 million sats here and it's this and it's that, especially when you're first getting involved, it is very difficult to then calculate that back into, okay, well, how much is that as a percentage of what I've got? And it takes time to mess around with that. So for anyone listening, if you're doing a reasonable amount, say you've got if you're doing like a Bitcoin or more than that, these fees really are very, very reasonable, and it's not something that you should really shy away from. If you're doing smaller amounts, it's slightly more expensive, and maybe you do this test first and make sure that you're happy with it and comfortable with it. But if you're doing a larger amount, they really are, in my opinion, very, very reasonable for what you're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. And something else with the fees as well is that you're not just paying for one mix. as long as you keep your mixed UTXOs in your Samourai wallet in the post-mix section of your wallet, which is kind of where your Bitcoin sits after it's been through its first Coinjoin, you're eligible for free remixing. So, you could stay there forever and get thousands of remixes, and you're still, you only pay the fee once. So the way that works is that new people coming into the pool, so people that are mixing for the first time, that they're adding their Bitcoin into Whirlpool, that they're the ones that cover your fees. So if you're remixing, you're known as a free rider. So you've already paid your fee, and then any subsequent mixes that you get after that are completely free, and all of the costs are covered by the newbies coming in.
Okay, so let's just talk about, so someone who's got one Bitcoin, let's say, they send it in there. I don't know exactly, but it's less than 1% to do this, and then they've had their remix, and you're saying that from that point, once they paid for that remix, just constantly their privacy is getting better and better and better over time, and there's no more cost.
Exactly. Yeah, it's their building on their anonymity set, which is basically you can look at it as the size of the crowd that they're hiding in, basically. So what do I mean by that is that obviously all of the outputs of a Whirlpool transaction are identical. They are always the size of the pool, so either 0.5, 0.01, or 0.05. And obviously, the more remixes you have, the more denominations of that size you are sort of mixed in with and that you are hiding amongst. So you can I always like to think of it as have you ever seen V for Vendetta with the masks?
Yeah, what a great film. Anyone who's listening who hasn't watched it, check it out, and I think you will understand better quite how important Bitcoin is and how it can help us, because after watching that I was like, oh my god. This
is scary how alike it to daily life at the moment, isn't it?
It really, that and 1984, read 1984 and watch that film, and after that I think there's no turning back. You're just like, Jesus, this is why this is just so incredibly important.
Yeah. So just bringing it back to Coinjoin, so every remix that you have builds that anonymity set. It builds the size of the crowd that you're hiding in. So it just makes it exponentially harder after every remix for anybody trying to track you, because there's just basically, again, referring back to that the mix diagram, there's just so many more paths that they need to try and track to follow to try and say, well, is this max, and so on. And so every remix just builds on that, and it's completely free. I can't stress that enough. A lot of people are coming to the Telegram chat and they're eager to get their sats through one mix and then send it all back to their cold card or to their cold storage, wherever that is. Whilst I kind of understand why they might want to do that, is they're missing out. They've already paid that fee. They're missing out on all of this extra privacy gain that they might get by just leaving it there, remixing for a little bit. But like I say, I completely understand why some people might be anxious that it might be they might have a lot of money in there to them, and they might have better peace of mind wanting to get that off to a cold storage.
What's the ideal then? So you've already paid for it, so you might as well get the most out of it. What if someone doesn't want to leave it remixing, or they actually want to send it somewhere? What would you say is the perfect anonymity set, or how many remixes would you say is reasonable and good, where you'd feel comfortable yourself sending it off? Is it 1? Is it 5? Is it 100?
Yeah, I think there's 3 schools of thought here. So number 1 is one mix in Whirlpool is enough to break deterministic links. So that is, like I said before, that is enough for anybody looking at that transaction to not know input 1 is the same entity as input 5 or 4. They can't tell because of the equal amounts. So that one mix is enough to give you forward privacy that anybody looking at the chain doesn't know exactly which one is yours. Generally speaking, in the Telegram chat, most of the experienced guys say, just to be on the safe side, it's free, wait for 3 mixes. And then the third school of thought, which is the one that I kind of fall into, is this is free, let's just leave it remix in there forever.
Right.
Well, that's for me personally. I've got an amount that I am comfortable that's not in a super secure cold storage, buried in a bunker underground. I'm just comfortable with that because I've been around the guys that are building this, and I've been, playing with this tech for, quite heavily for, a fair bit of time, and I'm comfortable in its security and things. But I completely understand where people would, be anxious to get that off. So I would say for most people, 3 is a good target to aim for if they absolutely really want to sort of get it out of Whirlpool and get it sent off to somewhere else. But how to do that and the best practices I'll come on to in a little bit. I just want to cover off some of the other approaches that you can take to mix using Whirlpool. So we've covered off mobile mixing. So the great thing about Whirlpool is that you can just get yourself a cheap Android phone and you can send some sats into it and gain some privacy and mix. And you can do that just using the phone, nothing else. And there's nothing else like it. There's no other services that offer that. So the barrier to entry here is very, very low. I think that draws a lot of people in. But the downside with mobile mixing, mobile only mixing, is that Android likes to kill background activity. So it's difficult to gain a lot of remixes on your phone because the app has got to be open and the Whirlpool service has got to be running for you to be eligible to be selected for a remix, which is done completely at random. So some days you might get 2 and some days you might get 10. It's completely random. But having just your phone on is probably going to be a bit of a pain because you're going to need to keep waking the app up. And then you might need to go into the settings of the phone to stop it sort of killing the service in the background to save battery and stuff. Everything's kind of optimized, to sort of work against Whirlpool running 24/7 on a phone. So it's not It's the mobile only is designed for like a quick mix before you want to spend, and it absolutely excels at that. It's your first mix always happens almost instantly, especially in the smaller pools.
So that if you want almost, sorry to cut you off, that could be almost someone who just wants to send to someone else or spend their money. It's like best practice would be just, at least get one mix through there just to break those links. And maybe it's not perfect, but you can do that from a phone pretty much instantly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you wanted to take it to the next step, you could get Whirlpool GUI, which is a desktop application. It's not a standalone wallet. You need the phone wallet to link to this desktop app. But what the desktop app allows you to do, you can think of it as a carbon copy of your phone wallet, but it just gives you greater functionality to sort of view how many mixes you've had, to start mixes, to change your mix target. So, do I want 1 mix? Do I want 10? Do I want infinity mixes? You can alter that within this application, whereas you can't do that on the phone. And also, let's say you install it on your MacBook. You're much more likely to leave you can leave your MacBook running with Whirlpool open, and then you can go and switch your phone off if you want with Samourai Wallet on it. And because that app is open on your computer, you will be eligible to get those free remixes that that build your anonymity set, and that's much more palatable than trying to keep a phone awake 24/7, which is quite difficult, to be honest with you. So as long as you've got that desktop app, again, which is like a carbon copy of your phone wallet, you'll be eligible for those remixes. And it just gives you, it's a really easy to use interface, and you can see when mixes are happening. You can see how many you've had. You can see where the funds are in the different sections of your wallet. So are they in the deposit? Are they in the post mix? Or are they in pre-mix, which is where they're sort of waiting to be mixed? So that would kind of be like the next step, and that's available for Mac, Windows, Linux, all the popular distributions. And then finally, which is kind of the ultimate really, is what's known as Whirlpool CLI, which is basically a command line interface that runs on a single board computer, which we covered off in our Node podcast.
So like a Raspberry Pi or something like that.
Exactly. So it comes packaged with most of the popular Node implementations. So obviously it comes on Ronin Dojo, it comes on the Noddle, and it comes on MyNode as well. So basically it links to your phone, and you can also link the desktop GUI to it. So you can use all 3 of these together. So let's say that you started a mix on your Android phone. Because all 3 of these are linked together, The CLI, again, it's just a copy of your phone wallet. It would see that initial transaction. It'd say, okay, thanks very much, I've seen that. Because I'm the CLI and I'm on a computer that is always on 24/7, I'm going to take that now and I'll just deal with it for you. So I'm going to be constantly speaking to the Whirlpool coordinator, saying, look, I'm here, pick me for a remix. If you're sort of in it for the long term and you want to get a maximum amount of privacy and loads of remixes, the CLI implementation paired with the phone wallet, obviously, and the GUI is like the ultimate stack to gain the most amount of remixes, because it's just always on, it's always listening, and you're in the perfect position then to be picked for all of those remixes that are completely free.
Yeah, so that's the ideal one, and I think that should be the one that everyone sort of strives for. But what's quite nice about this is that there's the 3 different options, and that you don't have to just go all out and go, oh, I'm going from nothing to running the node and having the GUI and having everything all set up. You can literally start this from just a phone, and once you've got comfortable with this, you can say, oh, well, actually, it would be nice to have this just constantly running in the background without having my phone on, without having my laptop on. It's just running off my node, and I actually quite like that there's those steps.
Yeah, like you say, the only absolute bare minimum for this is the Android phone. Like you say, you can build on that from then on in. Just one other piece I wanted to kind of touch on, given the recent Twitter drama, shall we say, about obviously if you are mixing only with the phone wallet on the Android phone, you will be connected to Samourai's backend server, which is Dojo. So for them to generate your addresses, for you to receive to, for you to mix, and for you to them to sort of serve your balances and process your transactions, you are going through their Dojo. So there's an element of trust there. Obviously, all they see is addresses. They don't know, there's no name sign up or email address or anything like that when you download Samourai Wallet. It's just a case of you are an entity and they see your addresses. That's it. If that is a risk for you, you should absolutely run your own dojo. And again, I think we touched on this again with the Node podcast. So if you wanted the ultimate privacy stack, you should be running your own dojo, which again comes on all of the popular Node implementations. So running dojo will probably be the ultimate for the Samourai users. But you've also got Nodal and you've also got MyNode, which come with an implementation of dojo, which again just increases that privacy a little bit more and just reduces the trust on any third parties. But if you're just starting out, it's absolutely not necessary, but it is recommended long term if you want that ultimate privacy.
And that's what you've sort of helped me set up. I run a MyNode. You've helped me in the background with these sort of things, and I'm not a technical guy, but once it's set up, it didn't take us long, and it's really, really nice. It's really slick, and I'm now in a position where I just know whatever's happening, these things are remixing, and I don't have to do anything. Like, since you helped me with it, I haven't had to do anything.
That's the really powerful bit of having that CLI implementation. It just does all of the heavy lifting for you. You can just set it and forget it. You can say, right, I want 100 remixes, and that's it. That's all you have to do. You might want to check on it maybe once a week, just check there hasn't been any hiccups or any. Occasionally these Raspberry Pis might crash and they might need a reboot, but other than that, you can just set it and forget it and leave it going.
No, it's really nice. And so, we're talking about 3 is kind of an acceptable amount. 1 is fine as well if you're just sending something on, but ideally you'd want 3+. When we're getting to those sort of numbers where you can set it to, I think on mine it shows sort of infinite, 100, 50, 25, 10, 5, 3, 2 and 1. Say you have it on infinite and you've left it on there, and now you're hitting 100 remixes. How good is that? Are we talking something's gone through there, it's gone through 100 mixes? If someone really wants to track you, what are their chances of actually having any luck with that? Is it literally you get to the point where it's like that they can't?
Yeah, I think, basically they can't. All they would be able to come up with is a list of thousands of potential outputs that might be yours. And that's all they could get to, basically.
Everyone in that crowd.
Exactly. Everybody that's in that crowd that has practiced good post-mix spending, again, which we'll cover off in a sec, you're hiding amongst all of them. The more remixes, the bigger the crowd you're hiding in, the more transactions you've gone through. They could only come up with a big, massively long list, in the example that you used of 100 remixes, they could just come up with a list of max could be any one of these 10,000 people. Because what you got to remember is, there's 5 outputs of a Whirlpool transaction. It's not just every remix that you have that increases your anonymity. It's every remix that the other 4 people in that mix get subsequently assist you as well. So it grows exponentially with every single mix that each of your, I call them Whirlpool partners, so to speak. If they remix, you gain. If you remix, they gain, and so on and so forth. And it just keeps growing and growing and growing.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I like that setup. I like the fact that you pay it once and then you have the opportunity to just continue. It gets better and better over time. I think that's a really nice way that it's set up.
Yeah, it's like you say, I'm not going to get into all the Twitter drama and stuff, but from some of the
let's get in a little bit.
I
know there's always bit like, you're much more technical and get much more into this stuff than I do, but there always seems to be a beef between all these different implementations, and they're always having a go at each other, and there's always something going on. I've never seen anything like it. It seems to be the hardware wallet teams seem to go at it with each other a little bit, but it seems that this is like just constant beef. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think one thing I will say, and it's something that I massively respect from the Samourai devs and their followers, is that they have very much got a fuck you attitude, I suppose, and that they don't bend the knee for anybody. They know what they want to achieve, and they're not going to let anybody stand in their way to do that. And I think competition is healthy, and for me, it seems very one-sided at this stage. There's a wealth of research done by the team, the OXT research team. They've done research into multiple different implementations, mainly related to Wasabi, although they have done a couple of pieces on Join Market as well. And for me, the writing's on the wall. There is systemic problems with the Wasabi mix, and I wouldn't with their implementation. And there's just too much evidence for me to ever advise anybody that uses that. And that's coming from somebody who the first mix I ever did was with Wasabi.
Mm-hmm.
So I am very much a Wasabi refugee, as the Samourai guys like to say.
Refugee.
I'll just briefly cover off, some of the stuff that sticks out for me is that the Wasabi team, they used to have a static fee address. So every single round of fees that they took all went into that same fee address. It was fixed. They fixed it now after much shouting from various people. But what that meant was that there was only, there was like one hop. If you got any malicious actors, Plus Token being a prime example, if you were in the same mix as the Plus Token guys, you're in very close proximity to their funds. And that there was people that got banned from exchanges for that exact reason. They got their accounts flagged because they'd gone through Wasabi and they were linked with the Plus Token scam. There is systemic address reuse in the Wasabi implementation. And that's one of the basics of Bitcoin Privacy 101 is do not reuse addresses. It's terrible for privacy. The one thing I didn't cover with the Samourai setup is that when you initiate a mix, that's called a TX0. What that does is it breaks down your chosen UTXOs into the pieces of the right size to go into the pool that you've chosen, and then it completely segregates the change of that transaction, because that is ultimately, they call it toxic or doxic change, because that is the little bit left over that is still tagged to your previous entity, the pre-Whirlpool bit. So that's the bit that's still sort of tied to you. So Samourai completely segregates that, and you've got to try very hard. Basically, it actually hides it from you. You're still completely in control of it. It's still your Bitcoin. You can spend it at whenever you want, but you have to sort of mark it as spendable if you want to add it to any future transactions. So it's built in that it's really hard to fuck that up. Wasabi doesn't do that. So the change from each mix stays in the mix. So it's very easy to completely screw things up again and include, your premix change with your mixed outputs, which again, it just links the entities together again, which is kind of the whole point of a Coinjoin, is to separate those links and completely remove the deterministic links of the transaction.
Hmm.
And then the last one, which I'll be honest, I unfortunately used this one when I was back in 2017, is they've still got a send all button or a send max button. I can't think how they've worded it. So you could do 5 rounds of mixing in Wasabi, and you could then, you've got loads of little chunks of mixed Bitcoin with some level of privacy. They then have a button built into their user interface that allows you to send them all together into the same transaction to say, what are most people going to do? They're going to send it to cold storage.
Yeah.
Merging it all back together again, completely, wasting their time. And I did that. I fell for that because I just thought, well, if it's in the interface, it must be safe to do. And unfortunately, most people that are new to this Coinjoin game, like I was back in 2017 or early 2018, whenever it was, if you give somebody the option to do a single transaction to get all their money, all of their Bitcoin back into their cold storage where they feel it's safe, they're going to do it. Yeah, they're going to do it. And that's completely, they've just wasted all that time and all those fees for nothing.
You just would, because you're like, well, why would I send multiple transactions when I can save on the fees? Or just send it as one, bang. Like it's exactly what I'd have done.
Yeah. So I think, again, that's one of the beauties of Samourai is that they've built their user interface to make it hard for the user to fuck up, basically. So they segregate the pre-mix stuff, and then they've got the post-mix spending tools that are, that allow you to spend and maintain your privacy. And there's just the way it's structured just makes it hard for you to fuck up, basically. Aside from the fact that the structure of the mix is completely superior.
Interesting. Well, and that's kind of why I said to you today, let's just focus on Whirlpool or on Samourai, because from speaking to you and everyone that I really trust in this space have told me the same thing. And, a lot of people like Join Market, but I think it's a little bit more difficult to use, and that there are trade-offs there. But I've been really happy with Samourai. I've been really found it pretty simple to use, and like you say, there are things in place to stop you doing what you would do and make a mistake doing, and that's really important, because if we're to expect everyone to start using this, or the average user to start using this, they're just not going to do it unless it's simple. And that's what held me back. So it's great to have these sort of tools available, and the more people who do it, in my opinion, the stronger Bitcoin becomes.
Yeah, I think just one final. I know I said I wasn't going to get into it, but I think it's important to mention on the Wasabi bit is that they recently announced, I forget the name of it, but it's basically Wasabi 2.0. I haven't got the details, but all I would say is people that are listening to this that are using Wasabi is ask yourself, why are they building a completely new implementation of Coinjoin? Why would they be doing that?
Sounds like Ethereum.
Exactly, yeah.
When 3.0?
Yeah, ask Vitalik.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a very good point. What I found weird is, well, not weird, but a lot of people seem to use Wasabi sort of instead of Electrum, and they use that instead of Electrum, but then they might do their mixes elsewhere. Is there going to be anything down the line where you can sort of use Samourai and not have to use Electrum? So you kind of have a setup where you've got your Whirlpool going, you've got everything in there, and then you've got that linked to your cold card. So is there a way of doing it like that, where all your keys are kept on that, and then that's your interface that watches transactions going through? So you just have Samourai, your node, and your cold card, for example.
All I will say is, Ronin Dojo, watch this space, keep your eyes peeled, and your prayers will be answered.
Okay, all right, that's exciting, but nothing more can be said about it for now.
No, like I say, it's that sort of stuff's not even in active development yet, but it's on the roadmap.
Okay, that's cool. Well, yeah, I think from that we sort of covered why it's important to Coinjoin, and I think that the best for most users, the best implementation of it and the best ways to use it, 3 different options, sort of starting with a phone and then ending with having everything running through your node and running all the time. And I think the main takeaways there are, try and get a minimum of 3 remixes if you can. You've already paid for it, so you might as well. Is there anything else that people should be watching out for when they're starting with this? Anything else that they could trip up on? Or, I think we're going to go on to, once it's been mixed, what to do after that point.
Yeah, I think that's the next natural step for us to cover is the post-mix spending tools, which again is pretty much unique to Samourai. I think, to Whirlpool. I think Join Market does have some form. I think they can do pay joins. But we'll cover off the Samourai tools. So post-mix spending is a sort of general tool. A general term for the transactions that you make after you've gained some privacy and you've been through the Whirlpool Coinjoin. So I'll start by saying that, so you've got a couple of UTXOs, pieces of Bitcoin that have been mixed. You've got that base level of privacy now. It's very, very easy for you to now make a transaction and merge those back together and potentially link the two back together. One thing I want to drive home is that, is for people to remember is that the equal amounts are sort of what give you that privacy. And if we're just blindly merging these pieces of Bitcoin together without using these post-mix spending tools, we're leaking a little bit of that privacy and sort of potentially giving people a thread to pull on. If they're watching the chain, it gives them a thread to pull on to go, oh, hang on, these 2 UTXOs equal this amount, and that's sort of the same as what went in 2 blocks ago. So it just, like I say, it gives them a thread to pull on. And so the post-mix spending tools are basically just different ways to form transactions in a way that maintains and preserves and sometimes actually increases your privacy after you have been through the Whirlpool service. So there's 3 main ones. Well, there's actually 4, I guess. There's 3 main ones, which I'll cover off first, and then the single UTXO spends. So the first one is called a stonewall. What a stonewall is basically is a fake mini Coinjoin that the wallet creates on its own using only the UTXOs within the post-mix section of your wallet. So let's say you've got 10 pieces of Bitcoin, all 0.01, and you want to go and buy something from a store online that is 0.03 Bitcoin. So it's a small chunk of your total post-mix outputs. What the Stonewall algorithm will do basically is it will pick more than 3 of those pieces of Bitcoin and create a fake mini Coinjoin, so that anybody looking at that transaction, that Stonewall transaction on a block explorer, they would look at that and think, oh, that's a Coinjoin. There's more than one person there. So we, I'm not entirely sure how much is being spent, or where it's being spent to, who owns the inputs, who owns the outputs. A little bit like Whirlpool, but it's only using your own inputs. That is switched on by default. So if the wallet can do it, it will do it. A couple of things to remember with a Stonewall is that the more UTXOs that you've got in your Postmix wallet, the better. So if you've got, using that example, you've got 10 chunks of 0.01 and you're trying to spend 0.1, so all of it, it's not going to be able to make a Stonewall because it's going to have to join them together. So the general rule of thumb is to spend half of your balance. Is like the easy way to trigger a Stonewall, because that kind of guarantees that the wallet has enough UTXOs to choose from to create a transaction worthy of being being classified as Stonewall, and given that those increased amounts of entropy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The next one, sorry, were you going to ask a question?
No, that's it. That makes sense. Okay. I will ask a question. What if that person isn't spending, and actually that person has put in their 0.1 and they've got 10 0.01 different UTXOs, and they now want to just all they want to do is send that to cold storage? What would they do then? Would they use a Stonewall, or they can't use that, or what would they use instead?
Yeah, so I've actually got an article on this, which I'll send you the link to, Max, which covers it sort of in a lot more detail than I'll be able to now. Using that example that they've got 10 pieces of 0.01, they will definitely be able to create a stone wall that will generally be just under half of the balance. So let's say 0.04. So they can send that, and that will create a high entropy transaction that people looking at it on chain won't be able to be sure what's going on there. That, let's say that leaves you with 0.06. You've got two more options now. You could do another stonewall for just less than half again. If the wallet can do it, it will. It just depends on the UTXO-mix, and also, it won't ever combine UTXOs that have been seen together before. Again, just to preserve your privacy. So stonewall as many times as you can first. When you get to the point where you can't stonewall anymore, and you still want to spend the remaining amount out to your cold storage, because Samourai Wallet offers coin selection, you can basically just click on each piece of Bitcoin that you've got left over and just spend them one by one into a fresh address of your cold card or your cold storage. So you could just send them one by one to different addresses. If you're going to do that, I would urge you to do it not do it sort of one after the other, because there are sort of what's known as timing analysis attacks. So if you're just doing one by one straight after the other and they're all sort of similar amounts, somebody might be able to glean from that these might be the same entity. Again, we're getting very much into the weeds of tinfoil hat stuff now, but to be on the safe side,
possible.
It's definitely possible. But yeah, so if you're doing it to cold storage, stonewall as much as you can, and then spend each UTXO one by one into a different address each time of your cold storage. But again, please, I urge people listening to this to go and read that article that I'll link in the show notes for you, Max. Because there are a couple of other bits to consider, but we'll be here for all night if I go through all of the nuance.
Yeah.
The next sort of post-mix spend tool is called the Stonewall X2. The X2 just signifies that there's two people taking part in this. So a Stonewall, very much like the original, Stonewall X2, very much like the one I've just covered, which is just called Stonewall, is again, this is actually a mini Coinjoin. And what you do is you collaborate, or you're in cahoots with another Samourai user who offers up some of their inputs as well as your own. So me and you could mix our inputs together for you to pay another third party. They don't have to be a Samourai user. They could be anybody with a Bitcoin wallet, basically. So what that does again is it just increases the confusion of the transaction graph and anybody looking, because they wouldn't know that there's two people taking part in that. They might think there's three. They might think there's one. Again, they just can't be sure. So again, it just increases that little bit of deniability again. And for anybody thinking, listening to this, thinking, well, hang on, why, if I'm helping Max do a Stonewall X2, why am I funding it? But what it does basically is I wouldn't actually pay anything. I would get back everything that I put in. I'm just sort of helping you. I'm giving you a couple of pieces of my Bitcoin to sort of throw in the mix just to confuse that transaction graph a little bit. It would still be the total balance if you're the one that's paying and instigating this Stonewall X2. It would still sort of come out of your balance.
Okay. And so fees wise, for obviously we've had the fees to do the mix, and then it's infinite remixes after that. Now we want to send it to cold storage. We want to send it out of Samourai. What are the fees for a Stonewall or a Stonewall X2?
Just minor fees. Samourai doesn't take any cut of those whatsoever.
So it costs no more to do a Stonewall than it would a normal transaction, or is it just that it costs slightly more because of the way that the transaction's set up, but there's no fees from Samourai?
Yeah, I mean, as with any Bitcoin transaction, generally, the more inputs you've got, the larger the size of the transaction in terms of bytes. So you're taking up marginally more space on the blockchain, so that you will have, again, very minimally increased blockchain fees. But yeah, in terms of what would the Samourai team get from that, nothing at all. It's just the minor fees.
Okay, so it sounds like that's well worth doing then.
Definitely. I would urge this is one of the secret weapons of Samourai Wallet that nobody else has got, is these post-mix spend tools. And it's a way for you to, if you want to, spend from Samourai by using a Coinjoin or a fake Coinjoin. And again, it's just the perfect way for you to maintain or even increase your privacy on chain when spending out of Samourai Wallet. The last one, which is my favorite, is called Stowaway. This is a Samurai's implementation of pay-to-endpoint or Coinjoin. It's all kind of the same thing. This is just their version of it. So a stowaway would take place between two Samourai users. So you couldn't pay to an external wallet currently. This is just a Samourai to Samourai thing. So if we went out for dinner, I paid, and then you wanted to pay me back using Samourai Wallet, Max, we could do a stowaway transaction. And a stowaway transaction basically has both you and I, even though you're sending to me, I would give you some of my inputs to include on the input side of the transaction. So what that does is that it completely destroys the common input ownership heuristic, which we covered off earlier. So the two main benefits of a stowaway transaction are the actual amount that you were paying me would not be seen on the blockchain because we're both putting inputs into the transaction. So let's say you were sending me 0.01. The likelihood is you would not see, if you looked at the chain, you would not see the amount 0.01. So it completely, you have no idea how much is being sent. Again, a bit like the assumptions that the chain analysis firms make is that they could only come up with a number of assumptions. So it could be this much being spent, it could be this much being spent. They also won't know who the recipient is because there might be 4 outputs and they wouldn't be able to tell who is actually the recipient in the transaction because of the way it's constructed. The last thing is because a stowaway looks just like any other Bitcoin transaction when you look at the chain, it completely screws with the whole transaction graph because it looks like a normal transaction. It means that any other actual normal transaction could be a stowaway. So basically, since the implementation of Coinjoin or stowaway, these firms can't be sure whether that's a stowaway and we're not sure who's being spent, or is it just a normal transaction with 2 inputs, 2 outputs. One's the change address and one is the recipient address. There's always that doubt now, ever since this was released, that a normal looking transaction might be a Coinjoin.
So it helps everyone's privacy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's really clever.
The way that the 3 I've just covered, Stonewall, X2 and Stowaway, the way that they're done is basically by the sharing of QR codes. So you don't have to be in person. I mean, it would be easier if you're in person to do this. But basically what we do, you would instigate the transaction on one phone, whoever's sort of starting the transaction and wants to pay. And then you would just pass back and forth. I think it's 3, maybe 4 QR codes. So you just scan it with either phone, and the wallet builds the transaction for you in the background, and it puts all the UTXOs together in a way that's going to confuse the transaction graph. And then it's just broadcast to the network like a normal transaction is. Yeah, so you can do it remotely. I've done quite a few stowaways with people on Telegram. You literally just share the QR codes back and forth. Or again, you can do it in person, which would be easier, but it's not necessary.
And with this stowaway stuff, are there any more costs from Samourai, or is it just a similar thing where, okay, maybe it costs a little bit more to put this transaction together, however, there's no cost from Samourai, or is there any more cost?
No more cost. No more cost. The only 2 things that you'll pay for directly to Samourai other than minor fees are your Whirlpool fees, and then finally they have a feature called Ricochet, which is basically a transaction that you can instigate from your wallet. So let's say you're sending from A to B. The prime example would be you've been through Coinjoin and you're sending to an exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you send, you've done your Whirlpool transaction and then you send it directly to an exchange, you've got sort of one hop on the blockchain for them to look back and see that you were taking part in a Coinjoin, which they might not like because Coinjoin transactions are they've got an easy to spot footprint. If it's got 5 inputs, 5 outputs, the likelihood is it's probably a Whirlpool transaction. Now they might not like that. So where Ricochet comes in is it adds, I think it's 4 hops between your Samourai wallet and the destination address. So what that does basically is it just makes it that little bit harder for the exchange or the chain analysis firm that's working for the exchange. They've just got to check back so many more hops to see if there's any history of what you're trying to send them that they don't like. It increases the work they've got to do and how much it costs and the computing power it takes. Could they do it? Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, it's just 4 hops. So if somebody's looking there to do it and they could trace it all the way back to a Whirlpool transaction, of course they could. It just increases the work that they've got to do if they were specifically targeting you, basically. So, and to this day, I don't think there's anybody that's used a Ricochet transaction and sent to an exchange or to anywhere that has been flagged or had their account locked or frozen or anything like that. All of the known instances have been related to Wasabi, as far as I know, anyway. So Ricochet is just an extra tool for that, and there is a fee for it. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure what it is. I don't think it's a lot. I think it could be 200,000 sats potentially, but again, I apologise if I've got that wrong. I'm not entirely sure. I've not actually done one.
Okay, all right. It's something I'd probably look into. That sounds interesting. And I think with all this kind of stuff, if you're going to go and take the effort to do this, you might as well do it and do it properly and do everything in your power to make it difficult as possible for anyone to track you. There's no point in half-arsing it. So I guess use all the tools that are available and do it the best you possibly can before sending it to cold storage. Wait 10 years and be a happy boy.
Yeah, I think overall, all in all, just to summarise, they seem to, Samourai guys with Whirlpool and post-mix spend tools, they just seem to have all of the bases covered. They just make it that much more difficult to balls it up, really. To being open and frank, could you merge all your inputs, all your post-mix inputs using Samourai Wallet? Yes, you could, but there'd be plenty of warnings before you do that, and it's not made easy for you. But at the end of the day, it's your Bitcoin. You're still in control of it, and ultimately you can do with it whatever you want. It's a non-custodial wallet, so that's the way it should be. But they have built the guide rails very high to make it difficult, for you to fall off, so to speak.
Perfect. And so for anyone who's listening to this now, they get the idea that, they're thinking, actually, I want to try this, but maybe they still have some questions. Maybe they want to dig in a little bit deeper. Can you just point them to where on your website they're going to find this information and articles to dig a little bit deeper?
Yeah, so the first protocol I would say is bitcoinqa.com/Coinjoin. That covers off the basics of, what is Coinjoin, why do we need it, how does it work, what are the different types, etc., etc. After you've done that, I would say head into the article section. I've got one for Samourai Wallet, the basics of the features that it's got. That'd probably be the good one to look at first. I've also got one step-by-step guide on doing your first Coinjoin using Samourai Wallet on your phone. Literally a handhold. It originated from a tweet thread that I made back in March, and that's literally, it's got screenshots in. It tells you every single button press that you need to do to get from 0 to a Whirlpool mix. The final one, then I've got one called Whirlpool and post-mix spending, frequently asked questions. That basically covers most of the stuff that we've kind of talked about today. There's a couple more bits added in there, and there's also the transaction graphs that we've spoken about a couple of times. So that's where those images are located, and they're from kycp.org, which is like a transaction viewer where you can see the sort of entropy that each of your transactions have got. So check out those 3 articles, and also I would say hop into the Telegram chat as well. There's one for Samourai Wallet. Again, I'll give you that link, Max, to put down in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll add all of those in, and it's definitely worth people having a read through because, it is a little bit confusing and it is a little bit stressful, all this stuff. But I think once you've read through all the articles and you've sort of had a play with it, you realise that actually the interface is very good, and not only is it worthwhile doing, but it's actually not as hard as you initially think. So, yeah, anyone who's listening to this, definitely go and check it out.
Like I said earlier, just start small. Just start with just over 0.1 Bitcoin to cover the fees and the minor fees, and follow the guide that I've got, and just dip your toes in, get comfortable with it. Once you're happy with it, you can start to throw some more sats in there. But there's no great rush for it. There's mixes happening all the time, so just take your time and get comfortable.
Perfect. All right. Well, this has been brilliant, and I think this series, I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, how helpful it's been, especially with the Node one. That seemed to really hit, and people were more happy after listening to that and didn't feel like it was just them being on the sidelines, because I think a lot of people were, and I'm hoping that this does the same. I'm hoping this helps get more people involved in Coinjoin and feel a little bit more comfortable. So thanks again for helping with this, and we will definitely be speaking in the future. And if there's any other bits that people say, oh, well, I've got to this stage where I'm now running a node and I've got my wallet and I've coin joined, and they have any other questions and they reach out, I'll be back in touch so that we can go through things.
Yeah, Max, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been a great chatting to you, and absolute pleasure as always.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll speak again soon.
Cheers, Max.
Cheers.